You're listening to Imperial County SELPA's Improving Outcomes for English Learners with Disabilities Meet the Expert Series. Welcome to Episode 3. My name is Lupita Holguin Rubio, and I'm accompanied here by my colleague Vanessa Lopez and our Senior Director, Dr. Deborah Montoya. During Episode 1 of this series, we learned about the value of establishing partnerships between educational leaders from the general education and special education departments in order to help meet the complex needs of dually identified learners. In Episode 2, we explored the topic of dyslexia and how it manifests in the language and literacy development of English learners. As we consider the varied needs of our students, today we will focus on the topic of language difference versus disability. To help us do that, we have a very special guest who will share her expertise, experiences, and recommendations on the topic of English learners with disabilities. Dr. Jarice Butterfield is a retired SELPA director and national author and presenter on topics related to English learners with disabilities, and also a key contributor to the California Practitioner's Guide for Educating English Learners with Disabilities. Welcome, Dr. Butterfield.
Hello, I'm Dr. Jarice Butterfield, and just a little bit about my background as it relates to the journey that I've been through with English learners. I relocated, I'm not a native to this state, I relocated to California in 1988. I knew very little about English learners. I was hired as a special educator at a bilingual school in LA County. And that kind of began my journey because at that time, to get a credential in the state of California transferred from another state, you pretty much had to start over. So I went to Cal State Northridge and obtained my California credential, and they happened to have a specialization in English learners with disabilities. And I was being at a bilingual school, I thought this was perfect. I need to really learn about this topic. So I did. I completed my credential there, a master's degree, and worked at this bilingual school for many, many, many years, and decided I wanted to get my language development specialist credential because I was just so passionate about the second language process and acquisition for both students with disabilities and without. And so I did. I obtained my, what they called back then, language development specialist credential. And one thing just led to another. Then I decided there were so many parents that didn't know English, especially parents, mothers in the home of my students. This was a very low socioeconomic area. Many of the mothers stayed home. They didn't learn English. The father would go out and work and they would learn English. So I decided I wanted to start a project for parents. So I wrote grants. And through Edison, California Edison, and I was awarded a grant, and I started a program for families where the parents would come in the evenings with their children, and we would teach them English. And it was just such a rewarding opportunity. I have to say that was one of the highlights of my career. I did that for several years. We relocated eventually to another community in Southern California, so I wrote another Edison grant and started the same program for families. And I had left the prior program in good hands. It was up and running strong. So I duplicated that program in another community. And at the same time, I was a special education teacher, special day class and resource specialist, became a literacy specialist, a reading specialist. So my work always involved, 80% of my students were English learners. So I've always, from the very start of my career in the state of California, I was involved with English learners, special education, English language development, which really gave me a rich background and rich experiences. And eventually, not planned, I decided to go get my PhD and work at the university level. So I relocated to Santa Barbara County, enrolled at UCSB, and took a job in a district near there, again, working within a town that had many English learners, and took a position there in a high school, which I had never done high school. So that was a new experience for me. But as soon as I finished my PhD, my director called me in and said, and I started applying for positions at the university, and I had an interview. And my director called me in and said, we're not letting you go to the university, we're making you a director of special education. And I oversaw bilingual programs. So I had not planned to become a special ed administrator. That's kind of the way the path led. Served in that capacity, served as assistant superintendent, but I was always over special ed, categorical programs, curriculum and instruction. So then one thing led to another, and Santa Barbara County SELPA contacted me and asked if I would apply for their SELPA director's opening because I had taught in Santa Barbara County, and that's, my career had been there for many years prior. And so I took the job as a SELPA director. Well, I went to my first SELPA director's meeting, and I hadn't learned you don't raise your hand. And they asked, is there anybody out there that has expertise with English learners and special education? Well, there I was. I raised my hand. That was totally my thing. So raised my hand, and that took me on yet another journey. I was made the liaison. At that time, we called it the liaison to the California Department of Education for English Learners with Disabilities. And the goal was to draft a manual, a guidebook for districts. Now, mind you, this was in the early 2000s. And the goal was to draft a guidebook. Attended meetings every month, went to the California Department of Education. We had folks from the special ed division. Back then it was the English learner division. At West Ed, we all worked on this manual. Well, I don't know, there was a political upheaval of some sort that I'm not even sure what it was, but we all worked very diligently on getting this information out to the field, which back then it was very different information, and there were some barriers. At that time there were different beliefs out in the education world, conflicting beliefs, and there were a lot of politics involved, but eventually the manual was scrapped and that all ended. I still would meet periodically with the State Department. And then in, maybe a year or two prior to my retirement as a SELPA director, about 5 years ago maybe, I was contacted by someone from the governor's office who said, we would like you to be involved in writing a manual on English learners with disabilities, and one of the big focuses was distinguishing a language difference from a disability. So the process started all over again under the direction of West Ed. And I knew I was close to retirement, and I thought, okay, I was very busy, but I will take on this project because it was something that I had felt was needed for many, many, many years. And one of the kind of jokingly statements I made to the California Department of Education is, I will do this if you will make sure that we get an alternate. Back then it was CELT, an alternate to CELT, and ALPEC I believe was just coming in. If you will promise me, because I have been trying for years to advocate for an appropriate assessment tool that was adopted at the state level for English learners with more severe disabilities. So I think they took me serious because they did. The alternate LPAC came shortly thereafter, the initial work towards developing that. So that's kind of my background. And then I retired as a SELPA director and decided that I just wanted to slow down and engage in consulting with school districts related to English learners with disabilities and some of the other areas that I'm passionate about. So that's kind of my journey. One piece, like I said, one thing kind of leads to another. I received an email soliciting me to potentially consider becoming a technical assistance facilitator for districts that are found significantly disproportionate. And when I really looked into that and talked to colleagues and found out the area of the most significant disproportionality in the state is in the area of Hispanic students with specific learning disabilities. And I knew that that was primarily English learners. I decided that I would apply. So I applied and was hired. And so I've been doing that technical assistance work. I primarily target and when people call me, I tell them I target Hispanic, areas of Hispanic ID, Hispanic Latino, areas of ID, SLD primarily, sometimes OHI. So I'm still engaging in that journey. And what it provided me, and I didn't even plan it this way, but what it provided me was this really rich opportunity to engage in research, action research. Because as part of that work, I'm going into school districts and I'm conducting file reviews. I dig into the files of these students and I look at their educational journey from the time they entered until this point in time. I look at their assessments, their IEPs, and I really, that's been a very rewarding opportunity for me to see what's really happening out there, especially in districts that are struggling, that are over-identifying.
The Imperial County SELPA Content Lead Grant, Improving Outcomes for English Learners with Disabilities, has utilized and highlighted many key resources that you developed that are found in the California Practitioner's Guide for Educating English Learners with Disabilities. Please share with us about the development of the chart, Comparison of Language Difference versus Disability.
I would be happy to do that. That's been a really key tool throughout the years. I actually developed that some time ago. Its original origin was in the guidebook that the State SELPA Directors Association guided me to lead and write. And so that's been a key resource for leaders around the state and practitioners, educators around the state of California for many years. Then a few years ago, the U.S. Department of Education contacted me and asked if they could also include it in their tools and resources at the Department of Education at the federal level. So it's been an important tool nationwide, and I've actually been interviewed before about that tool. The state of Texas contacted me at one time to talk about it. And how that tool came about. While I was developing the guidebook for the State SELPA Directors Association, oh gosh, that must have been about 15, 16 years ago when the first version came out, as well as I was drafting a book for LRP, I started a section titled Determining or Distinguishing a Language Difference from a Disability, because that seemed to be a big issue out there. I would get questions, emails, phone calls all the time about how do we distinguish a disability from a language difference. And I also have training and assessment and background in training as a school psychology work. And so assessment is an area that's near and dear to me. I teach assessment at the university level, and it's changed. It's evolved since I first began in the field, what we consider best practice assessment. But this was a key piece of that. And so I'm a very linear person. People started asking me, and I started trying to write it up as a narrative, and I went, wait a minute, this is a chart. And that's how I developed that chart. I put my thoughts into chart format. There were many resources I utilized and looked at to help develop the chart. Key people, and I can't remember, there was one key person that has since retired many years ago. She contributed a lot of important information or shared information with me. So it was a collection. It wasn't just all my opinion or thoughts. There was a speech and language specialist I worked with that had a lot of ideas. She contributed, and I collectively put it into that chart format. And when I go out and I provide professional development around the state, that usually is a key tool, and I share it as one of my handouts, even to this day. We shared it yesterday in our presentation. But what's so important about it, it divides it by category, by reading and math, speech and language, receptive language, expressive language. What does it look like when it's a disability? What does it look like when it's a language difference, or the student is a multilingual English learner? And it certainly is, that is very important information. I like to see that included in the reports, assessment reports of students. And I've been doing a lot of work as a technical assistance facilitator, as I shared. And, I always look for that. I want to see a statement. I want to, first of all, see a statement by the psychologist acknowledging that the student is an English learner. And then I would like to see a statement, whether they refer to my tool or their own expertise or other literature that's out there, about how they discern that this is it's not that it's a language difference or a disability, but you have to, as an assessor, discern, is the academic difficulty, the presenting problem, more related to a processing deficit or a disability, especially under specific learning disability, than it is the language difference? Because yes, these kids are English learners. They have a language difference. So we know there's influence of a language difference, but how do we tease out that there also is a primary or probably more prevailing issue with processing or an area of disability? So that's how I think the chart is important and how it can be used. It can be used prior to the pre-referral process when teams, I hope that it finds its way to general educators. I shared in my professional development trainings when I'm with general educators too, because it's the teacher that needs that information too. Should I make a referral to special ed, or are these issues that I'm seeing more common to a difference? So those are the ways that I feel the chart is really important, and I've had a more difficult time getting it in the hands of general educators than I have special educators, but it really has important uses for both.
Based on your current work as a technical assistance provider across California, share with us some gaps in practice and key trends that you have identified.
As working as a technical assistance facilitator across the state, one of the key issues, for lack of a better word, that I have seen out in the field is the barriers to or lack of collaboration between general education and special education. And I believe that's why the state, as part of requiring districts that have been found significantly disproportionate in one of the categories of ethnicity, race, and areas of disability, is they require that special ed collaborate with general education. If that plan is submitted with just a special education administrator's signature, they shoot it back. They want you to collaborate with a general education administrator as well, which I think is an overall theme, and that has been difficult, getting the two entities to collaborate. And I think we see the same thing out at the school site level, getting our general education staff to collaborate with our persons or professionals that are providing English language development and gen ed teachers, because we know these learners have very unique, challenging needs. There are many of them dealing with a disability. On top of that, not speaking the primary language of the classroom. And if we want to be successful with English learners, multilingual learners, we really have to learn to collaborate. It's just essential, and understand the difference between a disability and what would be a second language issue. And that's where our English language learner professionals can help our special educators. They each hold special expertise and can be a real resource to each other.
The Imperial County Improving Outcomes for English Learners with Disabilities SELPA Content Lead Team has worked with SELPAs, COEs, and LEAs. We also believe that a collaborative commitment is necessary and critical for furthering positive outcomes for English learners and English learners with disabilities. Your leadership as a SELPA director, a key contributor to the California Practitioner's Guide for Educating English Learners with Disabilities, and now your work as a technical assistance provider has positively shaped the practices of general and special educators across California. What advisement would you provide to leaders as they work and advocate towards improving outcomes for English learners and English learners with disabilities?
Well, and that's a very important topic. As I previously shared, in my role, I was both the general education and the special education leader in 2 school districts. So that gave me a very unique opportunity, which they had been 2 separate leaders. They took 2 jobs and combined them into one when I was hired. And it was a very busy role, but it was exciting for me because then I naturally could bring the 2 together. And so my advice for leaders is to reach out to your colleagues, to embrace that collaboration, that establish PLCs, professional learning communities, cooperative practices. As a leader, bring your staff together, have them discuss the issues related to English learners with disabilities, have them embrace the community, have them embrace families and bring them on board. That's another key component of the CSACE plan for districts. The plan that districts that have been found to be significantly disproportionate have to develop. They have to form a community partner team that meets periodically and discusses the issues related to the plan. And as I shared, at least 60 to 80% of the over-identification in the state of California is with Hispanic, Latino students that are have been labeled as having a specific learning disability. There's also some in many in other categories too, but that is the primary area of over-identification. So getting it's obvious to me that the state has come a long ways and that they realize the power of involving families in the process for bringing about change.
Dr. Butterfield, given your prior experiences and the importance you see in engaging in collaboration and collaborative practices between general education practitioners as well as special education practitioners, what recommendations might you have for teams to address prior to referral as those pre-referral steps that schools should engage in when considering the needs of dually identified students?
I think that's a great question. That's when I think it is key. I think that's key at that juncture. This is where your special educators should really consult with your general education staff, your English language learner staff, prior to that referral to special education to really discuss, is this a disability that's causing the primary academic concern? Is it more the language difference? And that's where you really can make the difference. In my work that I am engaging in out there as a technical assistance facilitator right now, I see a lot of referrals where the pre-referral steps, where these students these English learners became eligible for special education, and the pre-referral steps that are crucial were not followed. And I believe if special educators and general educators had collaborated and tapped into resources prior to making that referral, those students probably would not have needed a referral to special education. I'm not saying that the student maybe didn't have a mild disability. They might have a mild disability, but we know that the third prong of eligibility for special education is that that disability needs to severely impact your learning, and that need cannot be met in the general education environment. So what I'm seeing a lot of English learners being referred to special education at as early as kindergarten and especially in first grade, high numbers. And I believe that has contributed significantly to our disproportionate identification of English learners, especially Hispanic Latino English learners for special education. And like I said, many of these English learners do manifest characteristics of a disability, in literacy especially. That's where I see the primary disability. And, they manifest those characteristics of dyslexia or a reading disability. And they are a second language learner. So combined, they are really standing out in these classrooms. And the teacher's response is, oh my gosh, I need to make a referral to special education. When in reality, that disability maybe is not that severe. Maybe it's a mild phonological awareness processing deficit. That, we know from the research, can be remediated in general education if provided rich intervention under the umbrella of multiple tiered systems of support. We know from the research if an English learner can be provided or is provided 80 to 100 hours of intensive intervention in a very small group. The research actually, and many of these studies, the Lit Review was actually performed by Vaughn and her colleagues, who is an expert in the area of second language learners. If these English learners were provided 80 to 100 hours of intensive early intervention, that mild deficit can be ameliorated and they won't need a referral to special education. And at the same time, they're developing and they're given time to develop that second language acquisition. So I'm seeing a lot of what I feel are premature referrals of English learners to special education, whether that's due to implicit bias on the part of the educator or lack of resources. Those are still questions that I'm pursuing and other colleagues of mine are pursuing, what those root causes are and why these students are being referred at such a young age.
Dr. Butterfield, what barriers do you see English learners, once identified as having a disability, in attaining or furthering their English language development?
Well, particularly for English learners with a disability that receive an IEP and are eligible for special education, sometimes the collaboration stops there, and that concerns me. And many times I'm seeing these students on paper or, on the IEP where you have to indicate where they will receive their English language development. It just says in special education, but the special educators really aren't, even though it's built into it, they're really not experts in providing English language development, especially designated English language development. So I always promote the least restrictive environment, that students that have an IEP, if possible, we start with the least restrictive environment. They go out into general education. They receive their designated English language development with other English language learners that are at their level, at their instructional and language acquisition level. So again, that's an area where we need to really collaborate and make sure that we include students with disabilities that are English learners, multilingual learners. We collaborate and provide them their English language development in the least restrictive general education environment.
Dr. Butterfield, we're curious, what trends do you see out there that pose challenges for English learners, especially those at the secondary level?
I see two real challenges, and they're challenges that I've seen for a long time, but especially when I'm going out into districts and I'm doing file reviews and I'm actually digging deep to find what the root cause of over-identification is. Two challenges that I see. One, once a student, as they get older, sometimes this even happens towards the end of elementary, and as they enter junior high, middle school, and high school, the focus starts being on curriculum, passing classes, versus the intervention model and providing specialized academic instruction, which every student is supposed to have IEP goals related to their areas of need. And for specific learning disability, we know there's 8 academic areas of need. And I see very little specialized intensive academic instruction going on. And we know from the research, if we don't provide specialized academic instruction that is intensive and specifically targeted to the student's need, they're going to be lifelongers. They are not going to be able to exit special education. And we know from the data that if you don't become more independent and exit, it's more difficult for you to access a post-secondary education. So that's one real barrier. I'm really working with districts right now. I even have some of my own research projects going on where we're providing intensive specialized academic instruction at the secondary level to make sure that we can exit these students and provide them rich literacy intervention. The second issue that I see as English learners, and it's been very prevalent in the districts that I'm looking at right now, even though it doesn't directly contribute as a root cause to significant disproportionality. I think indirectly it does, because if you're not exiting students from special education and they're remaining English learners long term, the likelihood that they fully mainstream back into that general education environment is minimal. So I see a lot of long-term English learners, and I look at their pattern of development in acquiring English. And a key pattern that I look for is that they follow a normal trajectory on their LPAC of acquiring skills in English in maybe two of the domains. There's listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and then they're clustered differently now in the LPAC, but they do split them out by the four domains. And I see them making progress, steady progress in the areas not related to a disability. In fact, this is key for me in distinguishing a disability from a language difference. I look at that LPAC trajectory. If I see a student that's making steady progress in one to two of those domains, but then in the other domains, it's like this, that's a red flag to me. That usually tells me that the student has a disability that is directly impacting that area of achievement. And after 5-6 years of English language development, typically, if we're still seeing that pattern, that's an indication that the issue impacting their achievement is not related more to the acquisition of English, it's more related to the disability, and we'll start looking at reclassifying or redesignating those students. And I think that's really important, and it's not that English language development is a bad thing, it's a very valuable thing. But if the student is no longer an English learner and does not need that service, that pull-out period, that sheltered English, then we really shouldn't be keeping them labeled as a second language learner. And if their air patterns and their learning curve mirrors that of students who are not English learners that have a similar processing deficit or disability, that's a really key piece of information that can inform that process.
We talked about MTSS, SAI, and wondering right now, what are your recommendations related to language of instruction during intervention?
That's a great question, and sometimes my response and my expertise wins me friends, and sometimes it doesn't, because that's a controversial topic. But at the federal level, one of the jurisdictions of an IEP team is to determine the optimal language of instruction. That's why it's on our IEP forms. And sometimes in considering the optimal language of instruction, we might not have the resources available, so it becomes a difficult topic. But ideally, based on the research, we know that a student who first builds a foundation in their native language will better acquire a second language. That's not disputed in the research. What becomes sort of controversial is, what is a student's true native language? We have a lot of students that manifest English learners, multilinguals that manifest mixed dominance. They may have had, and I'll use Spanish because that's our most common second language. That's the most common native language of second language learners here in the state of California. And so you might have a student whose native language is Spanish, but they have siblings in the home speaking English. Parents both have to work, so they send them to daycare, which is sometimes, many times, or Head Start is primarily in English, so they really never develop any sort of a foundation in their native language. We assess language dominance, and they don't show they have a dominant language. That's when it gets a little bit more difficult to make those decisions. I've actually recently drafted a chart where I try to really sort that out. For example, if a student truly has a native language of Spanish, it's been used in the home, even though there may be some English, they have native language of Spanish, I prefer to provide, and they're at the K2 level. That's when it's really important. We know that's when you're ripe for learning language, building that foundation, as well as remediating a potential processing deficit that leads to a reading disability. So if they're at that K2, K3 level, and they have a dominant language, it is ideal to provide the intervention in that dominant language. As the students get older, we have to look at other variables. We have to look at what is the language of instruction in the classroom, what is their language of dominance, what's going to be optimal for that student. But at the younger grade levels, I definitely, usually in most cases, prefer that intervention or that specialized academic intervention under an IEP be provided in their dominant language so that we can really build that foundation, and they will do far better in English at a later point in time academically.
Dr. Butterfield, we want to thank you for your time and your sharing of your expertise, as well as experience out in the field in your multiple roles. Are there any final thoughts you would like to share with practitioners throughout the state of California that work with dually identified learners?
I think we have made a lot of ground in the state of California when it comes to recognizing and acknowledging English language learners and the diverse backgrounds that they bring and their needs, both students with disabilities and students without disabilities. I think we still have some work to do in really getting more expertise out in the field and providing professional development in training in the area of recognizing implicit bias and becoming more culturally proficient when we work with multilingual learners. So I think that's a good ending point.